There's two things that I love more than anything in the world. It's comic books and beautiful women. Not necessarily in that order. Well, actually, exactly in that order. And here's a fellow that knows a little bit about both, Hugh Heffner.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure, and welcome to the Playboy Mansion.
Pinch me. I mean, I never dreamed in my life I'd ever come up to, ooh, this is so exciting. I mean, I've seen it so often. I've dreamed of being here. But let me ask you, there's something about you that I think not a lot of people know, and that is you wanted to be a cartoonist.
That's true, yes.
Were you interested?
You went the right way, though, man. You did.
What were you interested in the cartooning before publishing, or did they sort of meld together?
No, the fascination with cartoons and cartooning comes from childhood.
Right.
And
Newspaper strips?
Oh yes, yes. I created comic books, a couple of hundred of them, with superheroes, and I grew up in the 1930s and witnessed the emergence of comic books.
Right.
In other words, I remember comic books before they were popular, when Big Little books.
Right. Reprint books mostly.
That were the major. That's right. There was the comic books originally were reprints,
Right.
and it was really the emergence of Superman. And I remember that moment.
10, 11, 12 you were. And you
Yes.
heard about it, he was
Yes,
coming?
I remember the afternoon when my brother came back for lunch and told me about this new superhero that could leap over buildings and stop trains with his. And all I had to do was, I just had to hear about it.
You loved it from the start.
Absolutely.
Which is funny because here you have these two kids, Jerry and Joe Siegel, who couldn't sell it because they thought the concept was too fantastic. People were going to laugh if he's picking up a car. And yet here's a 10, 11, 12-year-old who, the minute he hears it, can't wait to plunk down his dime.
And other kids all across the country.
Right.
In other words, if the kids had been running the comic book industry,
Right.
Superman would have been ahead immediately.
Right.
Sure, no question.
So,
And also a big fan of Batman.
Right.
Yeah.
And he came out a year later.
Yes.
Were you reading then? Were you a comic book fan buying the reprint books off the stand, or was it kind of tight money-wise and you had to let the Sunday funnies do it?
I was a big fan of the comic strips in the newspapers.
Alex Raymond, Milt Caine, if there are any favorites that come to mind?
Those are my. I was such a fan later on, as a matter of fact, that when Will Eisner's Spirit
Awesome.
ran for a time in the Chicago papers and then was discontinued, I subscribed to a Baltimore paper so that I could get
that
the
Sunday
Spirit.
supplement.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
But Alex Raymond was my idol. I mean, Milton Caniff and Alex Raymond.
And how did you shift from your interest in comics into publishing? Was that much later in life? You're in your 20s by that time? Or?
Well, no, they actually went hand in hand. I
Hand in
did my
hand.
first penny newspaper when I was about 10 years old. I started a newspaper called The Pepper
Right.
when I was in
Hot and
6th or
spicy
7th grade.
even then.
There was something
then.
about peas. I think I had a big thing about peas, and then drew cartoons for them, and drew cartoons then for the high school newspaper and the yearbook, and then when I was in the army. But all through the latter part of grade school and throughout high school, I did comic books and mystery stories and horror stories and illustrated.
Hand-drawn and old-fashioned.
and I still have
medium?
most of them. Yeah.
Really? I mean, could you reproduce them and sell them door to door in your little, pulling your little red wagon?
No.
No.
I did the penny newspaper
Right.
and the school paper. We sold door to door for a penny.
Maybe you were like looking at Wonder Woman and thought she looked better out of the American flag costume, Heff.
Yes, I certainly had that feeling more about
Me too.
Wonder Woman and Sheena in particular.
Oh,
Sheena's
Sheena.
hot.
Well, was it
I never had that feeling about Superman or Batman.
No, me
Avon
neither. I
Publishing
know.
and Planet Comics did some of the greatest good girl art. And maybe you can talk about that because this was, for my money, the first chance for the masses to get their hands on erotica in a legitimate way. I would imagine if you see the sales during wartime, in World War II, they skyrocket.
Yes.
The Korean conflict, Vietnam, people, the men are reading these books and you look at some of the covers and you think, oh my gosh, I mean, when erotica was not readily available, this must have been the only way to, or were there Tijuana Bible type things going on? I mean,
Well, sure, I'm sure there were. I mean, the 8-page Tijuana Bibles go back to the Depression era. but were not, commonplace. I do think it's true that there's a direct connection between what they call good girl art, the pinups of the 30s and particularly the war years, the 40s, and comic strip heroes. I think that there's a direct connection.
Well, I have to tell you, I was babysitting one time, and I found a Playboy in the man's closet, and there was a painting in there of Batwoman, which to a 12-year-old was very disconcerting, because, I mean, it was just achingly erotic. I mean, it's something I would dream about, and yet it was, wait a minute, this doesn't compute. It's Batwoman or whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about? Was that a Cole painting, do you think? I'm trying to remember.
I don't know. I don't know about
was
that.
awesome.
I mean, what, you're telling me you were disappointed when you discovered that real girls didn't have bat wings? Is that the problem?
No, I was sort of taken aback because, I mean, it was such a familiar image. It just didn't have it had added attributes, let's say, that were kind of said, there's a tingling feeling I can't quite explain.
I can
probably
explain.
This is
well.
a very compelling
Well, if Batman
painting.
saw that, Robin would have been out of a gig, Don. It would have all been over for Army.
Well, I think that the Batman phenomenon, which really intrigued me, because I've been a big fan from early on about those early classic horror films. I loved the Frankenstein monster and Dracula
Sure.
and all those Universal films when I was growing up. And the potential in terms of Batman and that mysterious aspect to
Quality,
him, which
sure.
had great appeal to me. And it lost a great deal when they added the sidekick,
That's
when
right.
Robin arrived.
To this day, people feel that was the end of the pure Batman, the vampire-like
Yes,
loner.
yes.
But I think for the artists and the writers, he didn't have anybody to talk to. There was always thought balloons, and ironically, by adding Robin, which was, that time, it wasn't a cliche, it was a brand new thing, it arguably gave it its longevity, because the kids could relate, gee, I can't be Batman, but I could certainly ride in the Batmobile. I'm not sure I'm crazy about Robin either, but I do think that it probably gave it the ability to reach even a larger audience.
Well, it did. Yeah, it did help to separate him from a Superman, and the sidekick aspect, obviously, it did have some appeal for a younger audience.
You thought he was corny right from the start.
That's what I thought. In other words, you've got this mysterious Dark Knight,
Sure.
and he's running around with a kid.
Yeah.
The relationship of which is a little unclear, and he's running around in brightly colored,
Yes.
And where were Robin's
Robin-esque
parents?
colors.
That's
red
true.
and
I mean, the whole
yellow
idea of
and
him
green
being
and-
in gray and black and blue is to be a creature of the night, and of course you have
Yes,
this little running
sure.
target in bright canary yellow, primary green, primary red.
It could have been like a hooker named Roberta, and then it would have been more street-oriented, right, Don?
Well, wait a second. You're thinking in terms of when it was 1939.
Okay.
Now you're still like 12 years old, and you pretty sophisticated to think instead of I'm almost part of the Batman mythos. You were ahead of your time, thinking, it's ruined the whole thing. Now,
Well, it took away some of the mystery. I would have been happier if he'd been a Bat Boy.
right. Oh, in a bat themed outfit.
It has to be a lone. It has to be a lone crusader.
Yeah. I can
it
understand
takes-
that. Well, one of the things that's very similar to the biography that I'm doing about Jackson Whitney. What I find parallels is to Jack Cole, and I'd like to talk about Jack Cole just a little bit. Now, he was very similar to Jackson Whitney in that I consider him a comic book virtuoso. I mean,
agree.
they use the term genius so loosely now, and it dilutes it for people that really are. But what shocks me is that here he creates Plastic Man with such an identifiable style, and yet when he does Females by Cole, I didn't know it was the same Jack Cole. And
Initially, I didn't know either. No, I was a fan. I was a
I
fan
didn't
of
know
Plastic
that.
Man.
I felt foolish, but you didn't know either.
No, I discovered it obviously early on, but I didn't know it to begin with because before the magazine even began, I started the magazine
54.
in '53.
Thanks for doing that, Heff.
But 53,
Well, my pleasure,
appreciate
and I
it.
say that advisedly. My pleasure.
Yeah.
my
Thanks.
question to you is, you actually printed your own cartoons in the early issues.
Yes, I did. Yes, and then my
On a monthly
taste
basis?
as an editor, no, my taste as an editor began rejecting my work. Yes,
And then you were able to afford professional artists.
Yes.
Now you were looking for a Peter Arno type. In other words, a signature artist
Yes.
for your magazine.
That's exactly right.
Now, you had Art.
Arthur Paul? You're talking about
Yes, Arthur Paul. Now
my
he
art director.
designed the rabbit logo.
Yes.
He was your first art director.
That's correct.
Did he find Cole, or were there just submissions for all over the country?
There was publicity in Writer's Digest and in other newspapers and publications about the fact that we were starting this magazine, and that was in '53. And I started to get submissions, from before the magazine actually appeared. And I got submissions from Cole, pencil roughs, before the first issue came out. And
nothing was right originally.
I rejected the first batch, I recall, and
but
then
saw his potential and
saw
encouraged
the
him in a
potential,
letter.
encouraged him, and had no idea, as I say to begin with, that it was also the genius that had created Plastic Man, which was really a parody of superheroes.
Absolutely.
And then at the beginning of his submissions were also line drawings and then watercolor
Watercolors.
wash, but in black and white to begin with. I had absolutely no idea that he had this incredible capacity
The
for
range
full color.
is astonishing, and then he does the comic strip later in '58. I'm blanking on the name, like Life with Bonnie.
Betsy and Me, I think.
Betsy and Me. But here you have the sitcom done in that sort of Gerald McBoing style, which again is a complete turnaround
Yes.
from the two earlier things we're talking about, Plastic Man and then his work for you. That's one thing about Jackson Whitney is these guys, I think, had a passion. I don't know whether you ever heard that Jack rode his bicycle from, was it Pennsylvania where he lived, to Los Angeles when he was a kid. 7,000 miles
No.
round trip, yes.
So he was a good athlete, but he was kind of dumb.
Well,
think
no.
Great artist, but
I don't know about that.
Well,
but,
he wasn't very efficient in time management. I mean, look at Heff, dude. He knows everything you know, and he's dated more chicks than both of us put together. That's impressive. Right?
It is. Very.
that's a whole different thing. I don't think guys were really interested in girls until
Can I
invented
touch your hand
Playboy.
real quick?
Sure.
Like you're going
But,
to
only for
transfer
a
some
moment.
of your magic?
Yeah,
Yes.
only a moment.
Don't move your fingers around while touching him.
Yes.
Well, here you have always been a supporter of the arts. I mean, I think in the world of comedy, you supported Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul, Shelley Berman, certainly all the cutting edge comedians, and you did that as well. And I'd like to talk a little bit about your relationship with William Gaines. Now, he starts this magazine, yet Harvey Kurtzman is the one who, again, we're going back to the genius virtuoso, lays it out, writes it, tells even the artists he hires, and he assembles some of the best people I've ever seen, Wally Wood, Will Elder, and so forth. At some point, he decides he should have equity in the magazine. Did he get encouragement from you, or was it his idea?
Yeah, well, my relationship was not with Gaines. My relationship was with Harvey. Mad started just about the same time, maybe a few months before Playboy.
Did Playboy come out December of '53 was the
Yes.
first issue?
Yes.
Okay, for
Yeah.
some reason I had '54 in my head because they were so close in proximity.
Yeah, but I
pick
remember
up,
picking up copies of Mad magazine, at
As
the
a
very
comic.
time. Yes, and I loved it. Quite frankly, I love those early issues
Flesh
more
Garden.
than anything that came later.
Bat Boy and Reuben.
Yes.
That's why Bat Boy stuck in your head.
Yes, one of those, I'm sure. Certainly not the love of baseball, I'm sure. At any rate,
He's got a lot of
Yeah.
familiarity with bats, Don.
I think that's what it is.
Ah.
Striking out.
And so
But-
you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is an amazing assemblage of talent.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in humor, I think, sex and humor, the keys to life.
Yeah.
One is the life force, and the other is, gives you perspective and humanity. It's the sense of humor. Trying to figure out what it's all about.
Oh, yeah. And there's
before
something
we
about
throw off
the
this
50s
mortal coil.
Well, the 50s sexuality to me is so...
Yes, talk about humor.
Ooh, yeah, it's also buttoned down.
Yes.
It's also not out there. And it's almost in a way you use your imagination a lot more because you can't turn on MTV and see it 24 hours a day.
Well, I'm a guy, who grew up in the 1930s, in the Depression era, and then into the beginning of World War II, and felt that I had missed the party. And I look back at the images of the Roaring Twenties and the short skirts and the jazz and the prohibition and the wild party.
Flappers and going
Absolutely.
crazy.
And I expected that same thing to occur after World War II. So, and I was
Said you
in
got
college.
Eisenhower.
And we got Eisenhower.
Frisbees.
We got McCarthyism.
Right.
And worst of all, we got shorts. We got long skirts instead of short skirts. And
Pleated
there is a
skirts,
connection.
saddle
I knew there
shoes.
was a connection. So.
And repression. You know,
Yes.
Dr. Frederick Wertham comes out with Seduction of the Innocent and stirs up this terrible controversy that nearly brings an industry to its knees.
Nearly destroys the comic book industry, and that is specifically why Jack Cole submitted cartoons to Playboy, because
you could see
he
the writing
couldn't get
on the
work.
wall.
Couldn't get work. Absolutely.
What I think astonishing about Cole and about Jack Whitney, for that matter, because I mean, is that when he writes in his bio, Jack Cole writes, worked in comics 1936 through 1953. Doesn't even mention Plastic Man by name. Now, for me, if I had done nothing but created Plastic Man, I would feel I had accomplished something. So I guess it's the hierarchy in artistry. In other words, you're a sign painter, you're a commercial artist. I guess the top of the rung was to have your own single panel strip, or what would be better? A syndicated newspaper strip like Charles Schultz in Peanuts, or Peter Arno in, where was he, Esquire?
I don't know, New Yorker.
New Yorker.
I think that it depends on the work, and it isn't a matter of where it appears. It depends on what it is you've created. I think that Peter Arno and Charles Adams were the ultimate in terms of magazine cartoonists in their time frame. But it's a whole different genre and a whole different world. The comic strips, nothing gets better than Milton Caniff or Al Cap,
Sure.
or that whole range of wonderful comic strips that were created then, and then the comic strip characters that were created for the comic books. Each has its own particular place. Certainly in terms of Jack Cole, the high points in terms of his career, as far as I'm concerned, were Plastic Man and Playboy.
Sure.
Betsy and Me was an okay strip, but very derivative. And I think he took it simply to...
Of what, Life with Father, or any just messed
Well, I
with
think it was a
harassed
situation...
husband thing?
Well, it had to do with the boy genius.
Oh,
I mean,
see,
that's,
now the only strips I read is up to when the baby's born, so I didn't
Well,
see the character develop.
There's a fascinating... Nobody really knows. Jack died early.
Oh, so
And
early.
in a tragic way. And no one really knows the reason.
And yet he chose to leave two notes, one a suicide note and one a letter to you, that makes me tear up. It's so
Yes.
genuine. And,
Yes.
and it's like Buddy Holly. You think what might have been if this man who died at 43
I know.
could have lived longer. Now, he married his childhood sweetheart. Was it, do you think, or do you have any idea, was it a troubled marriage, or the inability to have children?
I think the secret lies there somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think it has something to do with sexuality and has something to do with the lack of children.
Mm.
I think that only deductively, because sexuality was such a part of the work that he did for Playboy and these incredible women that he created. And then when he did a comic strip, it was about a genius child, and he didn't have a child. So I think it had something to do with that, and his wife, who would probably be the only one who would know the answers to those questions, married
Very quickly.
about a year after.
That seems a
Jack's
long time
death.
after being married, what, like 22 years or something. He married her right out of high school.
Yeah, and he also, he moved to the suburbs of Chicago to be close to Playboy.
Yes, he called it the pool table state.
Oh, yes?
Yes, he did.
Oh,
In fact,
what
he-
is that connection?
Well, I guess it's the shape of the state on the
Oh.
map. He called it the pool table state. He said, he wrote a friend, he says, I don't want to do it, but the good folks at Playboy have dropped more eagle shit on me than I've ever experienced, and I'm going to get a spoon and wade in there. So, I mean, and that's touching on what I want to talk about, because you're saying you dealt with Harvey Kurtzman, but great enmity was created falsely in Gaines' mind, because as an artist, I can understand people wanting to bring their work to a wider audience. Instead of being in a four-color comic book, Here you have a slick men's magazine. The demographics are completely different. So I don't see that there's a conflict at all.
Well, because you're leaving out Act 2 in that saga. The reality is that Harvey was not happy because he was not given a piece of the action, and you know about that part. And I offered to support him in a variation on Playboy, the creation of Trump magazine.
Right.
So it was, I think that is probably what created a sense of competition or conflict for gains.
Right.
I did that for 2 or 3 issues as long as I was able to, and then couldn't continue to support it.
Too bad it didn't come a few years later, because you probably would have been able to withstand the $100,000 loss when your empire really started to flourish. At that time, it was just...
It's always a matter of timing.
Yeah.
Sure.
And how did you see Trump? Did you see it as like a precursor to the National Lampoon or something?
Well, it was Harvey's baby. It was just providing a little more, sport and full color and stuff that he was not getting with Mad.
Right.
But to be perfectly frank, I think that in terms of Harvey's work, for me, his finest work was the early issues of Mad and Little Annie Fanny. It was, it was after he tried to do. There was when Trump didn't work, then he tried Humbug and Help.
Help ran, though, at least 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
Photo Fumetti.
And I think that under the right kind of circumstances and right kind of support, then that would have continued. But if he had done that, of course, then he would not have created Little Annie Fanny, and people will remember Little Annie Fanny
again
forever.
Well, of course. Now
she was hot. She was, and I want to just say one thing. Heff, you're really like my favorite superhero, because you were talking about how everything was buttoned down like in the 50s, Don,
Yes.
and everything. Well, Hef kind of came along and crashed through that wall, and broke down all the taboos. He's like, you're like Pajama Man, and I could be your psychic. I could be like Chick Boy.
Well, dream on.
I'm just thinking, it's the concept. Think about it.
No, yeah, all right. Give it a bit.
I'm going to give that some really serious thought.
Thanks, Hef. Can I touch you again real quick?
His people will talk. We'll contact your people. Will you please stop
Dude, you don't know
touching
what
my
this is. Like
interview
meeting the
stuff?
Pope, but without that
I
glass
want
thing
this
you
to be
travel.
I'd like to
professional.
make one thing clear.
Yeah.
If you were my sidekick, there wouldn't be a whole lot of that touching.
I will not. Dude, it's...
Do I know this man? He's not a hugger.
Dude,
No,
you had
well, I
ring
am a
like-
Well,
hugger.
not a man hugger.
My concept, quite frankly, which I am creating,
Yes.
is Mr. Playboy and his playmates. It's like, 7 or 8 blonde girlfriends. See, and then
With rhyming names, no doubt.
that's right.
I
Cherry,
had to
and
leave
then,
Cherry for a minute.
Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah, we live an ordinary life during the day, but
At night, all kinds of stuff.
who knows what
Yes.
kind of
Can I sleep
superhero
on your
things
lawn
we're
for
doing
a
at
couple
night.
weeks, man?
Say no.
I won't take
Please.
up a lot of space.
No.
I'm sorry, dude. I warned you. that
Listen,
this was
you
gonna
do
happen.
like gardening work. Apply through the proper
I'll do
channels. I'm
anything.
sure he'll let you trim his hedges.
That guy moved to Chicago to be close to Hef. I'll sleep on the lawn and live
Well, I'll
in
tell
the
you
well.
what, we have a lot of bird shit here. How are you with bird shit?
I'm on the case, bro.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll look into the bird
Dude,
shit.
it's better
Now,
than working
what
with
I
Taylor
find-
Donahue.
Okay.
Kurtzman was sort of irreparably separated from Gaines, yet people like Jack Davis and Will Delaware
Yes.
went back. Al Jaffe
Yes,
created
well,
the Mad Fold-In.
They
See,
work for us, and they
I
work
think
for...
it's a non-issue. I don't understand it because I'm trying to understand it.
I think it was personal between
Kurtzman and Gaines.
Kurtzman. Yeah, I
And
think
Gaines
so.
looked at him as ingrateful. I gave you this
Yes,
whole
yes,
chance
yes.
and blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, that argument goes on and on and on
Yes.
forever, doesn't it? Now, what did you think when he sent you Goodman Beaver? Now, Goodman Beaver, is that true? It actually was the genesis of
Yes.
Little Annie Fanny?
Yes. Yes. No,
And-
I was fast. He did a Goodman Beaver.
Sort of a Candide-like character, an innocent in a corrupt
Exactly.
world.
And as a matter of fact, he did one.
About you?
That's correct. He did one in which he visited the Playboy Mansion.
It wasn't it kind of, did it, you were amused by this?
I was much amused by
You
it.
were not
Told
insulted?
you he was
No,
a
quite the
superhero.
contrary.
Because I haven't...
If I have nothing at all, I have a sense of humor.
Okay, I haven't seen that piece, but I don't know what
Well, it was
approach you
very-
took.
He's seen every piece in
No,
town. I'm
remember,
sorry.
That's a
you.
different
But no,
question.
listen. You have to remember there were sermons directed against this man in
That
the 50s.
sucks.
I mean, you were probably seen in some circles as like the devil.
Of course. Of course. As a matter of fact, I think that may have been the thematic notion behind the Beaver.
Oh, really?
I think that may well have been. At any rate,
You get wind of
we
this
started
half
talking
satire,
about. We
yeah.
started talking about doing a strip for me.
Created for Playboy.
Right. And he wanted to do, either Goodman Beaver or a similar kind of character, and I said, no, I'd like it to be a girl instead of, in other words,
Good choice.
The Innocent Abroad is wonderful, but it is twice as good
If it's a sweet,
absolutely.
innocent, unbelievably voluptuous woman.
Right, and
So that was
and
your
it really
idea
is, and-
based on Goodman. Right.
Yes, and it and it really is obviously Candide or Candy.
Sure.
And it was a natural. In other words, because it offered the possibilities of satirizing almost everything, because you combine all of the things that are going on in terms of pop culture with this incredible Zoptic woman, and the chaos that she creates quite naively and innocently, and it defines really the very nature of what we're all about. I mean, we think we're building great civilizations, and the reality lies somewhere else in terms of real motivations, and it has to do with the relationship between the sexes.
My reality is trying to find the voluptuous, naive woman. They're getting harder to come by in this town, Hev.
They are, eh?
Yeah, I gotta hang with you, bro. I
think
need
that
you bad.
maybe I have them locked away.
I know you do, sweet.
I have this cloning lab up.
I believe it,
That's
man.
why they look
You've always
alike.
been one step
Absolutely.
ahead.
While England was busy cloning
Yes.
sheep, I was cloning platinum blondes.
Well, there's
See?
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm proud to be an American, man. Okay, go ahead, Don.
But it's
Okay.
not easy finding girls whose names all rhyme like that, too, which have always
He's the
admired.
master, dude.
Sure. Now, did you, from 62, Little Annie Fanny hits and hits big. Well, I wonder, has that not been turned into either an animated film, a live action film, something beyond the...
We are exploring exactly that right now.
Oh,
yes.
wonderful, wonderful. Because it's just so ripe. I mean, if you can get past the premise that this girl doesn't know how hot she is, that's almost science fiction. Because
Yeah, that's what I'm
she gets
talking
out of a
about.
swimming pool.
But
and
no, as
guys
a matter
are
of fact, it's
diving
real.
off
I mean, I
buildings.
think that's one of the things that's fascinating about beauty and women. They don't necessarily know the power they have. And there isn't necessarily a high correlation between how really attractive a woman is and her own self-perception.
Right.
True.
So I think that's, and that of course is, the delicious irony and the delicious, twist that makes it wonderful.
And that's what's
And it also
captivating.
reduces everybody down to,
Slobbering
we
in.
like, yes, well, what is referred to
I
in
could
other
talk to you
contexts.
all day, man.
Yeah, it's
In
like,
other
the
contexts?
little head is thinking for the big head for most of civilization.
Well, this sort of brings us full circle because, as you know, Hollywood has purchased the rights to one of my favorites, Commander Courage, created by Jack Whitney. Now, the interesting thing is the original concept. He's a high school teacher, and his nephew becomes his sidekick. In the new revamped, dark, cynical version, they have no relationship, so there can be sexual tension between now codename Courage, the man with no face or name, and this hottie. But with the weapons, and I don't know. I guess maybe I see things differently.
So, because you grew up with this.
Yeah, and I
You
didn't.
have problems with this.
Well, if it were a separate thing, I don't care. But that it's based on this bothers me because I don't think these guys. This doesn't bother me.
It doesn't. School teacher and his nephew.
Right.
That doesn't bother you at all.
Well,
bothers me a
but
little,
if
Don.
you look at it with adult eyes instead of with the genuine innocence with which it was put forth. I mean, I don't think they were trying to imply anything. Or
Well,
was
never-
Dr. Frederick Wortham correct?
Dude, the kid's wearing a thong. What do you want to be implied? Come on, how obvious is it? And check
His
out-
outfit's based on a circus acrobat, okay?
But he is wearing a thong, Will.
But they didn't have thongs
Maybe that's
in the
a fullback
40s.
because they didn't have thongs until later when you came out.
Yes.
That's when they got. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I think that Wortham was right.
Yeah.
Wortham,
How
I
right
think,
was he?
Well, I think that what he created in his book was the reefer madness of the 50s. quite frankly. I think
Well
that-
put. Did
was
you
it-
read it when it came out?
No, but I certainly read all about it, and I was very much aware of it, and the devastating impact that it had on the comic book industry. But the same thing, of course, was going on across the country. I mean, for me, it was all connected to the repression of the 50s that had so much to do with the Cold War and McCarthyism, and we fought this war to
For
give
freedom.
freedom back to the people, and then the government turned on us.
Right.
So for me, particularly as a college kid in the late 40s and early 50s before Playboy, the government became the enemy. And I think that it was that kind of climate and trying to get, women back into the home and out of the workforce, and guys in their gray flannel suits and back to conformity that I think created then the atmosphere that produced the underground that turned into the sexual revolution.
That's why we needed Pajama Man. Full
that
circle,
is right.
See?
It was Playboy and rock and roll that really opened up the door.
Well, in a way, I mean, I consider you someone that would be in the same category as a Jack Cole or a Jack Whitney, because you were defining an industry that didn't really exist. For my way of thinking, I wasn't there firsthand to see it, but were there other men's magazines around, or was Playboy like the only game in town? Or at least a classy version of what was kind of a more of a, cheesecake-oriented Stag?
In the 30s...
Was there Stag before Playboy?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Not only was there Stag before Playboy, I originally was going to call Playboy Stag Party. And I was going to make, instead of the bunny, I was going to make the symbol was going to be...
A deer with antlers.
Well, and you can imagine how that would have worked out. You and I would not be here talking now. You have to imagine those stag party... Those stag party clubs across the country with all the bunnies wearing antlers on their heads. I think that would not work.
They'd still be adorable. They'd still be adorable. I'd like to think even if he did call it Stag Party, we'd still be sitting here.
Oh, I'd still buy it, but I'd be afraid of getting my eyes gored out by one of
Well, there you
Well,
are.
the bad news is, how far could I have gone as Mr. Stag Party?
See?
I don't think that would have worked. See?
Oh. Now,
But I didn't, look that far ahead. But the point is, I got a letter right before I was about to publish the first issue in the fall of 1953 from a lawyer from Stag magazine saying that they felt the Stag Party would be an infringement.
Right.
And I was already having some reservations about it. I changed the title at the very last minute and called it Playboy. That's why the Party Jokes page in Playboy is called Party Jokes. It was originally Stag Party Jokes.
Oh. Now, did it just come to you like an epiphany,
Yes.
or you hadn't thought about Playboy before? Or he's a Playboy. He's a real gadfly. I'm trying to think of other things that might have been.
Gadfly doesn't work either.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think of what.
Gadfly.
But what's out there that would have been within his.
I thought about Gentleman. I thought about Satyr. I thought about all the other variations and made a list. And Playboy had a great appeal to me because it was a word that was generic but largely in disuse. And it related very much in my mind to the Roaring Twenties, to the party that I had missed.
Right.
So it was the perfect answer to Puritanism.
A Playboy is someone who is enjoying life to the fullest.
Yes.
He's not tied down. He's not a family man. He's enjoying life. So,
yes. And in that time frame, prior to Playboy, there really was no magazine that defined a lifestyle in a positive way for single men. The whole idea prior to that was there was something suspect for both men and women if they weren't married by the time they were in their 30s.
Yeah, what's your problem?
And to have an alternate lifestyle, either prior to marriage or as an alternative to marriage, was very revolutionary. I didn't think of it as revolutionary then, but it was just, I was in an unhappy marriage myself. I don't think all of that was conscious either, but it was just a matter of trying to create a magazine for, single guys.
Right. And then what brought it above the level of, what else besides Stag was out there? Were they all just like
They were all
sleazy?
outdoor adventure magazines.
Okay.
The most popular men's magazine in that time frame was True magazine.
Argosy
was the most,
but they
was
didn't
second
have
most popular.
women. They didn't have
No,
those guys
there
suck.
or any
not-
models or pinups.
No, if you were gonna be looking for
Pinups.
pinup pictures, you'd have to go to Night and Day, and
Was the magazine Night and Day?
yeah,
Okay.
Irish McCullough was very popular in those
Oh,
magazines.
sure,
Became
Sheena. Sure. 6'2". Oh my gosh.
And that was just her dimensions.
Good one, Hef.
Well,
Yes.
I keep feeding him. He's batting him out of the ballpark.
He's awesome.
But what I'm saying is, like, did you ever have any reservations, like somewhere into the run where you go, gee, maybe I am the devil?
Nope.
Well, I guess that answers
I have
that
always, from the
question.
very beginning, known with a certainty in my heart that I was one of the good guys,
Right.
without question.
Right.
I saw the hurt and hypocrisy in Puritanism and repression, And I came from. I'm a direct descendant of William Bradford, who came over on the Mayflower.
Oh, I didn't
On
know
my
that.
father's side of the family. We go all the way back to the original Puritans. So, and there was a point when, because I don't think that my mother and father ever fully, they were supportive of me, and my father actually came to work for me as an accountant and then as my treasurer. But in an interview in the 60s or 70s, my mother was asked whether or not she was proud of me. And she said, oh, yes, she was, but she would have been just as happy if I'd been a missionary.
Oh.
And I laughed at that, and I said, but Mom, I was.
Oh, in your own way?
Many times.
He had a different mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ironically, Jack Cole's father was a missionary, or at least a minister of sorts.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Well,
he
there were a
was
lot of
straight
ministers
there.
in my family, and a
Yes.
lot of missionaries.
1965, Hugh Heffner
Yeah.
throws a party at the Chicago mansion to celebrate the uproarious camp qualities of the Columbia serial Batman and Robin. And I know you're very modest about that, but in the audience that night is one William Dozier. So for us comic book fanatics, we know that Dozier is enamored of the experience, sees all of these young people falling about and enjoying this bright boy wonder, golly, you can say that again, Batman, all that crap. And
I like
he
that
goes
voice.
he goes to the airport, William Dozier. This is true. I mean, you should get a royalty. Sees a copy of Batman on the stands and says, I wonder if the comic book is as funny as what I saw at Hef's last night. Buys the comic book, reads it on the way home, and as soon as he gets to his office, secures the rights to the TV series. Now, when the TV series came on and really just created this unbelievable pop explosion, did you ever get any tip of the hat? Or
I kept, looking for a check in the mail.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
I think it's still in the mail.
I would have loved to seen you as a supervillain, my friend. Can you imagine?
Super villain?
Well,
Yeah,
for
check this out.
Batman, anyway. I mean, I could see you coming down those stairs with Sherry and
Have you ever
Mary
seen-
and
I
Terry.
can
ever
see you
seen-
pimping out Catwoman.
Yeah.
You know, doing something on the side, maybe. You got a little action.
Get your mind out of the gutter.
I can't,
mean,
I'm
come
with
on.
Heffner, dude.
Have you ever seen Batman and me in a room at the same time?
See? What did I tell you when we pulled up?
See, no, I
Okay.
haven't. I come to think of it, I haven't.
He
But
is
you know,
all
see, for
things to
better
all
or
people.
worse,
This is
some
my day job. I mean, at night,
some people
I like to dress up.
I'll be
Do you?
outside cleaning the poop, Heff.
Yeah.
I always saw that in the reverse. I thought a nice night you like to get undressed. But here's my question.
The other part of it.
Okay. Now, William Dozier now is either, some people just revile this guy because to this day, even in respected journals like the New York Times, when they talk about comic books, it's pow, bam, biff, comic books, big business. So in other words, it's stereotype comic books in a way back in 66 or 67 when it came on, that it's taken all these years to grow out of. Comic books reflect their times. Batman was selling less than 100,000 copies. When that TV show hit, it shot up to about $950 a month.
Absolutely.
And they started the comic book started behaving like the TV show. In other words, Aunt Harriet, who didn't exist, now pops up in the comic books just so that's not all
Wait a
male
minute. I
living
mean,
in one.
Marvel comics were growing during that entire period.
Yeah, that's true, because they finally
Absolutely.
made him real and they gave him problems and they
Absolutely.
were smart.
Yeah.
I'm saying DC couldn't see the writing on the wall. They had this antiquated idea of Batman as this humorless Boy Scout. And really, if you look at the comic books of the era, it's not exaggerated. There's an archness in the performance, I will agree, in the TV show. But in terms of authenticity, meanwhile, in an abandoned factory at stately Wayne Manor, it's always stately and millionaire Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
People don't call you millionaire Hugh Heffner.
I do.
Well, you, come on now. Please stay out of
I
this, will
gotta
you?
tell you, I'm
You
excited.
want
And
me
don't
call-
touch him again.
You want to be called
Donald-
millionaire, or you want to be
Donald
called
Swan.
Mr. Playboy?
Ooh, that's
Oh,
better.
okay.
That's
There
got
you
some
go.
cachet to
Find
it.
out who the real superhero
I mean, come
is.
on. Millionaires are a dime a dozen, but
You
how
got
many
it.
Mr. Playboys
This
are
is
there?
it.
Well, again, I had to get that in there because, for better or worse, you revived Batman. I mean, he nearly died. In '63, he was, alien Batman, zebra Batman. They didn't know what to do.
I know.
So I hated to see him degraded
I
in that
understand.
way. You know what I
Well,
mean?
You're relating all of this also to your own youth.
guess.
to the dreams and fantasies of childhood, and those, those are delicious for any of us. I think that,
Do you think that's what it is?
I do think so.
I'm
Yeah,
trying to capture my youth.
Of course, and hold on to it. I think,
Gosh.
But
Listen
that's,
to Heffner.
that's
Listen to Heffner.
quite
He's a wise
understandable.
man.
I think that, I think that
An Obi-Wan for the libidinous.
Yeah. A who?
Well,
one should hold on to one's dreams. I believe in all that.
well, I believe that too, because I think if you can stay in touch with your inner child,
That's it.
okay.
It's the name of it.
Doesn't that mean you have to be infantile and
No,
childish?
no,
You can be
but, yeah.
sophisticated, erudite, even intelligent.
Yes.
And-
Bad example. I
Excuse
understand
me?
the thought,
See,
though.
5 minutes he knows you already.
I know.
But my point is, I think that you are the perfect example of someone who's balanced that Peter Pan syndrome and still become your own person again. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay.